This is bananas. Bananas. This is bananas. Bananas. Okay, I have to cut that out. What's going on, everybody? It is your boy MXP back with another review, another video. Yes, I have been streaming this game for the last, I'd say, month or so, and we are talking about Donkey Kong Bananza. Now, we're not going to compare apples to oranges or apples to bananas, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna try and cut the banana puns very short this review, but you know, when this first got revealed at the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, a lot of people were very excited. A lot of people were wondering, like, okay, when are we going to get, Donkey Kong games are very high quality, but we haven't seen a lot of them in a while. While there was a ton of excitement, there was also a question around, okay, Mario's 40th anniversary is coming up. We haven't had Mario Odyssey came out back in 2017. What is going on with that? Why do we have this new Donkey Kong game? Does that mean Mario's going to take longer to come out? What's going on with that? And is this game going to be quality? The only 3D Donkey Kong game we've had was Donkey Kong 64, which everyone knows was not that great. But just speaking for myself, I was super excited for this because I love Donkey Kong Country specifically. Is one of my favorite games of all time. Of course, Tropical Freeze, Donkey Kong Country Returns, all those games are very good, but they're 2D or 2.5D. I played Donkey Kong 64 a little bit back in the day, but I don't really remember it, and I think it could have done with some more refining. And now when I first saw this, I was like, okay, I'm excited when I first saw it. But then when we got the actual 17-minute direct going super into detail with everything, I knew it was a day one purchase for me right away. And just some background on the game. So we did find out that this was originally being developed for the original Switch, but some of that footage got out and we saw like, okay, it does not look that great. Some people that don't have the Switch 2 was like, listen, I would have took it either way, but this was the same team that made Mario Odyssey, the EPD 8 team. So Nintendo has these different teams that work on different games. So you will see a little bit of that Odyssey DNA, the colorful, the whimsical, all that kind of stuff. And as opposed to Mario Odyssey, where it was just, pretty much platforming and then, you transform into the different creatures and things like that. This game is very, very destruction and terrain heavy with a myriad of different locations to actually play on. You got different snow levels, the jungle levels, the getting closer to the planet's core, all that kind of stuff, and you're just destroying every single thing. Anything you think you could destroy, you can, whether you got to get an upgrade to get stronger to do it or use a certain power up to do it. You can pretty much break everything. There's stats that actually keep track of all of that, and you're just going around getting these Banandium gems, fossils, other collectibles, and it's just a really good time. So we kind of went over the presentation, the graphics and everything, and what was really funny is Donkey Kong is a lot more expressive in this game. When you look at, even when we saw the Mario Kart World trailer the first time, or that little snapshot when we got the first look at the Switch 2 back in February, we saw like, okay, this is a completely different Donkey Kong. He looks more expressive. He's more like, I don't call it emotion, but it's kind of like when Super Mario Wonder came out and there was those little tiny tidbits that let you see stuff like his eyes following things as they go around or making certain facial expressions and how he interacts with Pauline. And that's the whole story with this game is you're on a quest for bananas. That's the real thing. And you're trying to get towards the core to stop Void Kong and his gang of enemies and his team or whatever, and you're going through this. Pauline is trying to get back to the surface. She has very low self-esteem from the beginning, but you're trying to help her through that. She has this amazing gift as far as singing and things like that, which plays into the gameplay of the game. And so along with just going through the level, there's obviously these other different locations you can go through as you're tearing through the terrain. And then you have these special challenge levels as well. And now the challenge levels do kind of get, I won't say repetitive, they kind of follow a formula. Like sometimes it's, okay, destroy a certain amount of enemies in a certain amount of time, or destroy the building in a certain amount of time, or, get the certain amount of balloons and things like that. And some of it is a little repetitive, but some of them are very, they take advantage of the new abilities that you got from that level, or sometimes you have to combine abilities later on in the game. I really have to think about how you handle, each different situation. My favorite sort of like extra levels are these gold bonus stages where you go through and you just try to get as much gold as possible, which really was reminiscent of, back in the days on Donkey Kong Country when you would become one of the, ostrich or dolphins or rhino or whatever animal, and you would try and get as many of the little gold mini trophies as possible, and then those will add up to extra lives for yourself. So these are very reminiscent that you only can try them one time, so you want to take full advantage and get as much money as you can. And now the gold is the main currency in the game. You'll find it everywhere when you're digging. You'll find treasure chests and things like that, but you'll also find fossils as well, and these different types of rare fossils and things like that. That's the main collectible outside of the bananas or the banandium gems throughout the level, and you'll be able to use these in shops. And now the shops buy things like treasure maps, cosmetics, and things like that, but the cosmetics aren't just cosmetics. They actually have added features to the game, which made me like, when I saw it during the direct, I said, oh, they're going for a way deeper experience than normal here. So you have these banandium chips as well, which you can use, and you'll be able to get a banana, which will then upgrade, later and later. You'll need more and more banandium chips, but then with the gold, you can go in to what they call the stuff shop, buy balloons, extra lives, maps to find different fossils, as I mentioned before. And then with the fossils, you go to the cosmetic shop, the style store, and then you can buy different cosmetics for you and Pauline. Some of them have different effects, like, okay, more likely to find treasure, swim better, have less damage in lava, things like that. And then also the different furs and stuff like that don't really have a difference. But I would be lying to you if I said that I didn't prioritize some of the furs over actual useful cosmetics. I'd be lying to you. I seen some, once you get to some of the gradient furs, like the matcha one, the con candy looking one, there's so many great furs that I was willing to spend 10, 15, 20 fossils all together on, and to me it was well worth the price. Now, while searching for these banandium gems, the actual purpose of them is to actually level up. Yes, there is a skill type of set put in here. When you find these bananas, you're like, okay, how do I get to it as I'm navigating? If you want to use it as an analogy for them would be like the power moons for Mario 64. When you actually break them, you'll be able to eat them. When you go to each sub layer, going deeper and deeper to the core, you'll get threes and sets of five sometimes, but then you have the skill tree to upgrade your different bonanzas, which we will talk about in a second, but also, increase your health, increase your strength of your punch, your turf surfing, all kinds of sorts of things like that. And just how I mentioned, Pauline's kind of gaining her confidence more and things like that, you'll get these different bonanza upgrades and power-ups that you can use for a short amount of time. So you have the Kong Bonanza, which everyone was calling the Super Saiyan 4 Bonanza, which is just like a super Hulk smash, like strong power-up that you can go through and just smash through a whole bunch of different types of terrain and things like that. In addition to that, you have the Zebra Bonanza, where you can run really fast, especially over, water. Certain materials will actually start disappearing if you run on them in your base form, so you can't use it with that. And then outside of that, you also have the ostrich, which is actually my second or third favorite bonanza. Again, I don't want to go over all of the bonanzas, but the ostrich one is pretty good as far as getting around, dropping egg bombs, whole bunch of different really useful ways to use these power-ups. And again, you'll see on your skill tree, as you get these bonanzas, you'll get different power-ups for each one of them to just keep upgrading, whether it's make their ability better, certain items that Pauline will wear, the cosmetics will have your energy last longer or be more effective and things like that. So everything pretty much that you see in the game is upgradable. Everything can be spent on something. There's so much to do and so many things to do, and they find a really creative way to implement it. Like I said, in some of the challenge levels or even the main gameplay, if you watch some of my streams that I did on it, it's all on a playlist that you can watch. But at some points I was like, oh, let me just try and Tears of the Kingdom this, right? Where you could just quote unquote break the game and just go through a challenge super easily. But sometimes you couldn't do that. You had to do a combination of things, or sometimes there was a certain way to do it, but you could find a way around it by using the ostrich to just fly across or turn into a certain bonanza that I won't mention because, like I said, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but you could kind of circumvent a lot of these challenges, but there still would be a key element of it where you had to be a little bit more creative. And yes, it would help you, or certain challenges you can only use a certain bonanza, or some points in the game you can't use bonanzas at all. So they're like very great when they're there. They let you use it. They're very fair. And I found some of the challenges, I was like, okay, this is really easy, but then some of them I spend literally, I'm not even joking, maybe like 20, 25, even 30 minutes on some of them. Some of them were very, very difficult. Speaking of difficult, let's talk about the combat slash, the boss battles and things like that in the game. So for the most part, the actual enemies aren't that difficult to beat. Some of them, they will be covered in different materials, like a harder stone. Some of them might be covered in, poison or thorns and things like that. But then you have the boss fights, which are pretty formulaic, but at the same time, some of them require you to think like, okay, I can't just use dirt on this material because dirt just doesn't work. It's just going to break apart. Or he's covered in a certain thing that only reacts to the light. So I have to make sure I can get him over to the light or put him in the dark and make him more vulnerable and things like that. And, at the end of these boss fights, you will be able to get like I said, a 5-pack, a 5-pack of Banandiums, and basically get one whole skill point to, get stronger if you need to. But trust me, some of the bosses later in the game were very difficult. One of them in particular, the second to last boss, took me so long, and I was getting so frustrated. I was just like, bro, I'll end this game right now. I'm fine with not finishing the game. But there definitely was a great variety of enemies to fight, even some that no spoilers, but near the end of the game, you might get some nostalgia and some, you'll say, throwbacks or fan service. And that's what I liked about the game, too, where there were things like Cranky Kong, Diddy Kong, and stuff like that put in the game, or references to other certain characters and things like that, but they weren't explicitly put in the game. Like, make no mistakes about it. This is a Donkey Kong and Pauline adventure prequel, probably. The timeline's a little off. A lot of people are kind of debating about that, but that's what it is. They pulled, a little bit of hints and stuff like that out there, but they made sure this was its own individual, fresh from the start, stands on its own game in the franchise, and I think they're a lot better for it. And as I mentioned earlier with the presentation part, like the very low, I don't want to spoil it if it's even a spoiler, but there's a lot more layers to this game, pun intended, than I thought originally. At first, when I mentioned all the environments, forest here, snow here, desert, amusement park, I thought it was going to be 8, just like regular Mario games and things like that. But there's so many different levels. Like, I'm talking in the less than 20, but more than 10 amount of different layers and varied environments and different gimmicks and stuff like that keep the game fresh. And I kind of worried about that a little bit as I was playing it. It's like, yes, the game, I won't call it repetitive, I would just use the word formulaic, where it's kind of like, okay, get to the end of this, or activate this 4 times or 5 times or whatever, find the fossils if I want to, get the Banandiums and keep it moving. And a lot of the challenges, like I said, there's a formula to the challenges as well. However, they do enough to make it fresh. The environments are very handcrafted. You could tell this game, like, there's a reason it had so many years in development, and it was a good thing that they ended up moving it straight to the Switch 2 instead of the Switch, because it was able to fully utilize that, use the different environments, the colors, all of it. It just works really, really well together, and I'm glad that this game did come out. And of course, if I'm keeping myself honest, I have to talk about things I didn't like about the game. There aren't a ton that I didn't, but one of the main ones I will say is the camera, specifically when you're going underground, because obviously you're underground, so camera work would be weird. It has to kind of show where you're at, where you're trying to go around and things like that, but it can't reveal everything. And I felt that once you do go underground, the camera gets very weird. You try to move around, you can't see yourself, you can't see where you're going. Obviously, if you're underground, there's stuff above you, which it doesn't show you. It does its best to kind of phase around things so you can see yourself from that like aerial view, but I found the camera to be very, very, very like not good at it says. Like, I don't know how else to put it. You can't tell what type of material is around you sometimes, so you can't punch through it and you wouldn't know why. Like, there's that feedback to let you know, but yeah, the camera to me was not greatest. And then I kind of already mentioned this, but I felt like a lot of the enemies were not that difficult. I mean, the regular enemies running around, I guess they're not supposed to be. You could say the same thing for Mario. Most of the enemies are not super challenging. Some are a little tougher than others, but I would hope that with you having these different bonanzas that, at your fingertips, that the enemies would be a little tougher. Of course, there are the tougher enemies. I mentioned some coated in different armor and things like that, but for the most part, I never felt that challenged by it. Some of the bosses I did, or if there's enemies and then the environment itself was added in, that made it a little more difficult, like poison or lava or stuff like that. That's where the challenge kind of came from. But from the enemies themselves, didn't really feel that. But again, this is a platformer. It is a family game, but challenging enough and has a lot of extra stuff for adults to play and stuff like that. So that wasn't a super gripe with me. But in the beginning, the lack of challenge was definitely very noticeable. And then the last thing would be, I wish there was a chart, I guess. I don't know if this isn't exactly a negative, or maybe it is a little handholdy, but it would be good to know kind of what materials work best on other ones. Again, this you can kind of figure out yourself just by playing and the discovery, but there were certain times where I'm trying to use a certain material to break another one and it wouldn't work, or if I'm fighting an enemy or a boss and I'm like, bro, what, like, how do I get through this? Or what type of material can I use to turf surf across this without it melting so fast and things like that. And again, not a super like actual thing. Like, I'm willing to play the game and figure it out, but just if I had to think of something that could have been maybe changed or make it a little bit better, the experience, that would be one of them as well. Now, when we talk about, lasting appeal and things like that, so How Long to Beat has the game at approximately 17 and a half hours if you just do the main story. But then it says if you do the main plus the side stuff, running around trying to collect a lot of stuff, that'll be 28 hours. And then it says completionist is 46 and a half hours. So 46 and a half to me sounds about right. So I spent around 35 hours. And while I wasn't doing, completionist stuff, I pretty much did every challenge I could see. I bought enough Banandium gems and fossil maps and stuff like that to do a whole area before I move on to the next sub layer. But then as I was trying to get to this review, I was like, okay, the last two sub layers, I kind of just beelined it, but luckily those had the least amount of collectibles to get. So ended up being like 35 hours. I had like over 620 or so Banandiums that I got. So I'd say total amount of collectibles, I'm probably around that 70 to 75, maybe a little more, like a little less than 80% as far as all of the collectibles and challenges and stuff like that. There's a post game, which I haven't gotten to yet, but again, there's plenty to play here to last a good amount of time. And Nintendo's been doing a good job as far as spreading these releases out. I've been saying that, but they definitely, had enough time where you're going to spend the whole month probably getting through everything if you choose to do so. And that's my review for Donkey Kong Bonanza. Now, I know a lot of people, again, comparing it to, I'll make the joke again, apples to bananas with Mario Odyssey and this, but I would say this is a completely different experience. I don't think you should look at either one of them to be the other one. I think Mario's a lot more straightforward. Mario is, even historically, okay, you get power-ups and then you're able to just use them or carry them along with you to the next stage and kind of blast through everything. In Donkey Kong, even from the 2D games, it's been, even without the bonanzas, it's like you're yourself. If you get hit one time, not in this because you have hearts and stuff, but you get hit or you fall, like, that's it. You got to make sure you're able to use your environment, throw barrels at enemies and things like that. It's a lot more platform or whatever that game's like created environment is. Like, that is the main part of the game. It's not just, oh, I'm gonna throw on a fire flower, shoot a bunch of fireballs and run around and finish the game, no problem, or things like that, or whatever. And I think there's enough mechanics in this game. There's enough care, a lot of character, heartwarming story. Even though I didn't personally, I didn't care for the story that much, but it was still cool. And I think they did a great job. Now we have the 40th anniversary of Mario coming up. Will we get, who knows? Like, this was very different. So maybe we'll get something completely different for the next Mario game. Donkey Kong, hopefully it won't be too long before we get another I think it'll be a while before we get another 3D one. Maybe we'll get another 2D or 2.5D with some of these mechanics as well into it, some more destruction and things like that. That would be cool to see. But either way, I definitely recommend it. If you have a Switch 2, to me, this is definitely a must buy. You have to own this if you have a Switch 2. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Get this game 100%. It's worth the $70. I don't want to say 80 because that would have been crazy if they had this 80 to Mario Kart. But if you're looking for a game to buy, 70. This will definitely be on my top 10 games of 2025 list at the end of the year. So I'm not jumping out the window like everybody else putting it above Expedition 33. I can't. It just doesn't work. Either way, buy it. Thank you for checking out this video. Subscribe if you have not already. Leave a like on this. Hope y'all enjoy your long Labor Day weekend. And yeah, check out all my other content, all the links in the description. Doing daily TikToks, daily shorts. Check me out on Instagram, everything like that. We pushing with these videos, live streams, everything like that. We're on the road to 2,000 subscribers. Trying to hit that soon before the end of the year. So I appreciate you guys. As always, spread the word to your friends and family. Appreciate you guys, and I'll check you on the next video.